So maybe you've heard of ETFs, mutual funds or index funds, but you have no idea what it means. You go from video to video trying to figure out a breakdown that actually makes sense. Well, in today's video, I'm going to give the simplest, easiest breakdown of what an ETF is, index fund, and mutual fund are, and the differences between the three. Not only that, you'll have my 3 favorite ETFs, index funds, and mutual funds for any beginner who wants to get started investing. And we're starting right now. Welcome back, investors. My name is Kevin. In today's video, we are going to be covering the differences between index funds, mutual funds, and ETFs. We're going to make it as simple as possible. That's my goal here. If you don't know who I am, I'm actually a personal finance guide, not a guru. And I teach young professionals how to simplify investing, cut out the noise, and just make investing fun again so you can just go on with your lives and live your kick-ass life. It's really my goal on this channel to help you automate your investments, build real passive income, and help you start feeling more confident so you can be that kick-ass investor you always knew you could be. Now, like I said, if you're probably watching this video, maybe you're just coming out of college or you've been in the workspace for quite a while, but no one's ever sat down with you and said, hey, Kevin, I need to teach you about index funds, mutual funds, and ETFs. You know you should be investing. You've heard these terms before, but honestly, there's so much content out there, it gets so overwhelming sometimes. And a lot of the content is just boring sometimes. Maybe you want to start feeling a little bit more confident with your money. And you know the first step is, hey, figure out what the hell an ETF, mutual fund, and index fund are. But when you actually sit down and try to learn what these things are, you get overwhelmed. You're like, man, this person said this person said this. Which one do I choose? And sometimes being overwhelmed, it's so easy for us to push things off. We're just like, man, this takes a lot of work. I'll just figure out next time. It's almost like we give the California invite where, you know, your friend is just like, yeah, let's meet up. Yeah, we'll do it later. And then guess what? Never actually happens, right? Later never happens. That's the same thing with investing. And we can't let this happen because guess what? We don't want to miss out on that key compound interest for our investments. And we just don't want to live with that guilt of not investing. So today I want to teach you the concept of ETFs, mutual funds, and index funds through the concept of ice cream. You know why? Because most of us, we've had ice cream in our life. We understand the concepts of ice cream. And guess what? We can actually, believe it or not, apply this to investing. And I actually teach this concept, the ice cream method, about ETFs, mutual funds, and index funds in my full Kick-Ass Investing Academy as well. So let's build off the current knowledge that we already have already. And so like I said earlier, in today's video, we're going to be covering what index funds are, the differences between ETFs and mutual funds, and the 3 funds that I would recommend for any beginner to get started with as well. And before we get started, shameless plug, if you want more tips and tricks on how to invest, you might want to consider smashing the like button and subscribing to this channel for more weekly tips on investing as well. But back to the content. Point number 1, what index funds are. So if you're doing your research on YouTube and you're hearing, hey, index funds are better than the mutual funds or index funds are better than ETFs, then they don't know what they're talking about. Believe it or not, I was already investing and I had no idea what things like ETFs were and all that. So if you're doing your research online and you're hearing like, yo, index funds are so much better than ETFs or index funds are so much better than mutual funds, then guess what? This person doesn't know what they're talking about. You know, I was actually doing a lot of research before this and I was like, man, some of this information I'm seeing on these videos isn't really accurate. So the way I want you to think of index funds are like ice cream, right? So let's talk about ice cream. So I looked up the definition of ice cream and this was the definition. Ice cream is a soft frozen food made with sweetened and flavored milk fat, right? Kind of sounds disgusting, but think about it. No dairy, it's not ice cream, it's probably sorbet, right? And I hate to say it, if it's warm, ice cream soup isn't really ice cream. It's just straight up nasty, right? So if we're comparing index funds to ice cream, let's look up the definition for something like an index fund. So an index fund is simply a portfolio of stocks or bonds designed to mimic the composition and performance of a financial market index. Or in simpler terms, it's just a collection of funds that meet a certain criteria. So an example is like the S&P 500. You probably heard of it. It's the most common thing. It's the top 500 US companies, the largest companies in the US. So when you invest into an index fund, you're investing into all these pieces of the company, right? Pretty simple so far, right? So now that we determine ice cream equals index funds, let's break this down even more. We know with ice cream, there are certain ice cream flavors, right? We got chocolate, we got vanilla, we got strawberry, we got all those Ben and Jerry weird ass flavors, but we have different flavors, right? Now the ice cream flavors, I want you to think of these as ETFs and mutual funds. Now I want you to think of ETFs and mutual funds as different flavors of index funds. Now, to be fair, not all ETFs and mutual funds are index funds as well. So now that we kind of define what ice cream is, and we've kind of equated ice cream equals index funds, now let's kind of go into the ice cream flavors. How I want you to think about it like this is ETFs and mutual funds, they're different ice cream flavors. Let me kind of explain. So when we think about ice cream flavors, what do you think of? We think of, oh, there's chocolate, there's vanilla, there's strawberry. We got those weird ass flavors from Ben and Jerry's like Cherry Garcia and all that sort of stuff as well. And some people even have, like David So, he had the hot Cheetos flavor, which was my favorite. At Drips and Swirls back when it was open in LA. But while all these are different, all these are actually considered ice cream because they fit our initial criteria. Hey, it's made out of dairy and it's cold as fuck. Now, the same thing goes with our mutual funds and ETFs. Think of these as flavors. So yes, you can have an S&P 500 index fund as an ETF, or you can have it as a mutual fund as well. So let's think about it. We can have an S&P 500 index fund as both an ETF and mutual fund, right? And to be fair, that's an oversimplification of everything because not all ETFs and mutual funds need to fit this criteria, but you get the point, right? You can have an S&P 500 or you can get an index fund as either a mutual fund or an ETF. So I just want you to keep that in mind. So like I said, when somebody says an index fund is better than an ETF or an index fund is better than a mutual fund, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. All right. So with that being said, let's go into point number 2. What is the difference between an ETF and mutual fund? So like I said, both these funds, they're just a collection of assets, right? They could be a collection of stocks, a collection of bonds. They could follow an index. They might not follow an index. Just think of it as a bucket of funds. I think that's the easiest way to think about it. But what's the difference between the two? Well, first of all, ETFs actually fluctuate throughout the day. So think of it as almost like a stock. And technically, in order to place a trade, you actually need a stockbroker to place a trade for you. But mutual funds, on the other hand, the price is only calculated once a day. So you can't short these, you can't day trade with these at all. But mutual funds, the price is calculated once per day. And that's when something that's called the net asset value is determined at the end of the day. And like I said earlier, technically with an ETF, you need a stockbroker to place that trade for you, right? So you might get dinged with commission fees, but if you're buying an ETF, like for example with Vanguard or Fidelity, think of these as brokerage accounts or bank accounts for your investments. If that is the case, then they usually waive those fees for you. But the biggest difference, and I think the major difference between ETFs and mutual funds is automatic investing. Since you need a stockbroker to be able to execute these trades, and since, with ETFs, the prices fluctuate throughout the day, keep in mind, you can't do automatic investing with ETFs, but that is something you can do with something like mutual funds. For me, this is a major killer because I like to dollar cost average, meaning I like to invest like every single week, a set amount every single week, and just set it and forget it. And that's something that you can't do with ETFs. So keep in mind with that, unless you like going in your computer, typing in your orders and wasting time like that. But no one got time for that, right? So that's why I prefer something like mutual funds if you're starting out. So again, TLDR, the major thing that you need to know, ETFs, their price change throughout the day. Mutual funds, they only change once. They're determined once a day. And also mutual funds, you can do automatic investing. ETFs, you can't do that. So that's the short version. So now that you know what an ETF is, what a mutual fund is, let's dive into the third point. So let's dive into point 3. Let's dive into my favorite funds for anyone who's just getting started with investments. I'm going to cover 3 topics. I'm going to cover stocks, meaning more aggressive funds, bonds, which are a lot safer, and something called sector funds. So it's like, think about it as a specific focus or sector that you're investing in, like healthcare, technology, things like that as well. So I'm gonna go one by one and give you my favorite mutual funds and ETFs in each of these categories. But like I said, try, if you can afford it, go with the mutual funds. That way you can do dollar cost averaging, you can set it, forget it, and not have to worry about anything. All right. And as I go through each of these, I'm going to give you both the mutual fund flavor and the ETF flavor of both these funds as well. So let's get started. In terms of stocks, if you're beginning, I always recommend going with the S&P 500 fund. You just can't go wrong. And especially if you're a young investor, you can afford to ride out the dips in the market as well. So there's two funds I would recommend. So if you have Vanguard, the first fund I would recommend is the Vanguard 500 Index Fund Admiral Shares, or VFIAX, or Vanguard S&P 500 ETF, or VOO. So that's the first one I would recommend. If you have Fidelity, I would recommend the Fidelity version. So Fidelity 500 Index, which is FX, AIX, and the iShares S&P 500 ETF, which is IVV. All right, so that's kind of the stock ones. Now let's go into bonds. Now, personally, I like total bond funds like for safety, but since I'm still relatively young, I'm pretty much almost 100% into stocks because I can ride out the dips and dips in the market, right? So if I want to do bonds, these are the ones that I would recommend for myself. So for Vanguard, we have the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index Fund Admiral Shares, which is VBTLX. And then the ETF version is Vanguard Total Bond Market ETF, which is BND. And then for Fidelity, we also have the Fidelity Total Bond Fund, which is FTBFX. And also the ETF version of that fund for Fidelity is Fidelity Total Bond Fund ETF, which is FBND. Now, finally, like I mentioned earlier, we have the sector funds. And with sector funds, there's so many things that you could do. You could do REITs, you can do all that. But personally, I'm very biased. I believe in healthcare, especially in our pandemic right now. Healthcare is freaking booming. So just keep in mind, these are a little bit more advanced. They're not for every single beginner, and there's really high minimums to do these. So not everybody can afford to do these as well. But in terms of sector funds, the one I really like is Vanguard Healthcare Index Fund, Admiral Shares, VHCIX, has a 100K minimum. And then we also have Vanguard Healthcare ETF, VHT. All right, so that's the ETF version. And then we have Fidelity, which is Fidelity Select Healthcare Portfolio, which is FSPHX. And then we have Fidelity Healthcare Index ETF, which is FHLC. So those are some funds that you can take a look at as well. So that's pretty much index funds, mutual funds, and ETFs in a nutshell. So if you like this video, chances are you'll probably like my Roth IRA breakdown, where I talk about where should you open your Roth IRA. With so many brokerage companies out there, you see things like Vanguard and Fidelity and Robinhood, and you're just like, where should I even start? So I'll have it in the cards as well, so you can check out that video. Another video that you might like is something like the Fidelity No Fee Index Funds video. If you are really interested in mutual index funds, you should watch that. And if it turns out that you don't like any of these videos, that's fine. I have one more for you. I talk about dollar cost averaging, and you can check that out in the cards. You know, if you have any more questions about index funds, mutual funds, make sure to comment below. I use a lot of your questions to source my future videos, and I try to reply to everyone these days as well. I'm trying to make a forward effort to in 2021 to be more interactive with this channel, really grow this channel, and just help as many people as well. And also, I have one more gift for you, is if you want to learn how to set up your Roth IRA in just over a weekend, hey, make sure to take my free masterclass. It's totally free. It's a real class, right? It's a real mini course on how to set up your Roth IRA in just the weekend. And honestly, people have done it in 2 to 3 hours, and bam, they're done for the rest of their life. So make sure to check that out. Thank you for tuning in to Kick-Ass Investing. I'll talk to you guys later. Take care. Peace.